the mental health commissioners here in South Australia, and they're going to be talking about what's this thing called peer work, which I only found out about yesterday. And I, as someone just quietly, not so quietly because it's in the ether now, when I found out about this, I actually was very excited because as someone who struggles with PTSD and mental health issues, to hear about something like this really made me a little bit excited. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. So I'd like to welcome Sharon Lawn, Karen McCulloch, Kate Stock, Heather Nowak. Thank you, guys. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Mark. How's the morning going?
Yeah, it's good.
You didn't tell us we were going to have the hula hooper that we had to follow. What an act!
Oh, I know, right? I thought I had the hula hoop for a bit there. I was like, oh no.
Okay, let's get on. Our session's called "What's This Thing Called Peer Work?" And before I start, like all the others, we'd like to pay our respects to the Kaurna peoples, past, present and emerging, and also to people with mental health lived experience. So in our session, I've got my three panellists. I'll be your raconteur. I've got the lovely Karen McCulloch and Kate Stock and Heather Nowak. Heather and I are both mental health commissioners here in South Australia, and we're all absolutely dedicated to peer work. So how the session will run, I'll give each person a question or two. We'll give them a couple of minutes to answer. I'll be the timekeeper, and we'll see if we can have time to take some extra questions as well. So off we go, Karen, you're the first. What is this thing called peer work?
Hi, well, what is peer work? That's a good question. So peer work and peer support refers to mutual support given to people who have similar experiences in life. And so those experiences could be mental distress and recovery, substance dependence and recovery, trauma recovery, violence and recovery, those sorts of things. The peer worker who has similar lived experience can relate to another person, and they just get it. And through that connection, they can share their knowledge and their strategies and coping skills, and together assist the other through their tough times and into recovery for a life that they choose.
Sounds good. And how did you become a peer worker? What did you have to do to become a peer worker?
Sure. I've been a peer worker for 7 years now, and originally I'd heard about peer work through somebody else, and I'd had just had a bit of a tough time, and I thought to myself, I want to give back. How do I do that? And I found out about peer work. So originally I applied for an organisation. I was very lucky to get that, and sort of had on the job training at that stage, because peer work was still very new at that stage, but now it's quite evolved, and it's come quite a long way to being recognised as a true profession. So after 4 years of being as a peer worker, I started the mental health peer work certificate Cert 4, which had just sort of came in around that time. And even though I'd been a peer worker for 4 years, it really, really helped with my skills. I learnt new skills, different approaches, and made an amazing, valuable network of peer workers that I use on a weekly basis, not just for my own self-care, but in my practice as well. So it was really, really valuable. So the Cert 4 in mental health peer work now is the recognised training for peer workers, and we recommend that all peer workers actually do this training. So if you're actually interested in doing the Cert 4 in peer work in mental health, I suggest that you go to training.gov.au. On there, or have type in mental health peer work, the Cert 4. It'll come up. It'll tell you a bit about the different subjects and things that are involved, and it'll also give you a big list of all the different organisations that actually do the training. So it's available online. You can do it face to face. There are a few different things. So it depends on those groups. So I'd encourage you to give one of those RTOs, the registered training organisations, a call and have a chat to them about it and see if it's for you.
Great. Thanks, Karen.
My pleasure.
Kate, how are you going?
thanks. How are you?
Good. Now, I understand that you are a fairly new peer. You've been doing peer work for a little while now. So
Yeah.
you're a really good person to ask these next two questions to. So what are some of the best things about your role as a peer worker?
I guess the very first thing I want to acknowledge is that this is more based on my experiences, as the best things for a peer worker is going to change for every peer worker. So as a peer worker, I'm in a position where I'm able to build a unique relationship with my clients by utilizing my own lived experience. When I've been a client in mental health services, the workers who are willing to be real and vulnerable with me were the ones that I was able to build the strongest connection with. It helped me to feel like they understood what I was going through and what I was thinking. I felt validated and like I wasn't alone. Being able to build the same relationship now with my own clients is my absolute favorite thing about being a peer worker. I understand that clients are the experts in their own lives because as a client, there were times I felt decisions were being made for me rather than with me, and I felt powerless. I love that being a peer worker minimizes the amount of power that is between the worker and the client. A big part of this power minimization is mutuality, meaning that both my clients and myself are benefiting from the relationship that we've formed. I support, empower, advocate, and help my clients on their journey to healing, but my clients are also supporting me on my own journey of healing. I cannot count the amount of times I've said something to a client or the times a client has said something to me, and I've been able to take that home with me and use that in my own recovery. As peer workers, we're employed on the basis of our lived experience. We are employed to use our own lived experiences with clients, and it cannot be said how incredibly validating this is. In the past, I've had jobs where I've had to hide my mental illnesses so that I wouldn't be judged. But being a part of a supportive, open team as a peer worker means that I don't have to hide this part of me. I'm not going to be judged, but instead my experiences are going to be valued. Utilizing our lived experience with clients is a huge part of peer work, but we're also able to use our experiences with our team. We're able to use our role to raise awareness amongst our colleagues that people without lived experience may not be aware of, like the power of language, for instance. Our role is to provide our colleagues with a different perspective that someone without a lived experience might not fully understand.
Super. Absolutely super ideas. Yeah. So Heather's smiling greatly at what you said, I'm sure. Yeah, fantastic. So there's some of the great things about being a peer worker. There's some challenges too, aren't there? So what are some of the challenges that you've noticed?
Yeah, there are absolutely some challenges. At Mind, where I work, one of the big things that are discussed continuously amongst peer workers is purposeful disclosure. So being able to disclose things about your mental health and recovery is great. But the biggest question I always ask myself is, what is the purpose of me sharing this piece of information about myself? Am I doing it for the client's benefit because it will be helpful for them? Is there some other unexplored reason that I might be sharing this information, something that isn't of benefit to my client? So just being mindful of that every time I'm with a client is something that's been a bit of a challenge to build that skill in. Along with purposeful disclosure, it's so important to be mindful about what you're disclosing, as there is always a risk of re-traumatizing yourself or re-traumatizing your client. Not long ago, I disclosed to a client that I also had a history of trauma and that talking about it in therapy had been helpful for me. I had wanted to show this client how talking about trauma, while difficult, can be healing, but I hadn't considered a human's natural tendency for curiosity. The client asked me an uncomfortable question, and I realized very quickly that that wasn't something I was willing to talk about with clients at the time. And I had to gently and somewhat awkwardly tell the client that it was a topic that I wasn't wanting to discuss at the time. It's easy to say something without thinking or to accidentally go into too much detail about something or not realize if something you say may be triggering for a client, and it's another thing that requires practice to be mindful about. When working with clients with mental ill health, it is common to hear a lot of stories about clients' past, which often involve trauma. This is hard for any mental health worker, but as a peer worker, there are times where this trauma might hit really close to home for yourself, and then this can in turn be triggering for you. I've talked to my team leader about the particular types of trauma that I can't work with at the moment, not because I don't want to, because I'm certain that I could help them in their journey as much as they could help me in my journey. But because I know it will be way too triggering for me, and then it will impact on the relationship that I'm able to build with this client. As a peer worker, you have to look after your own mental health to ensure that you can be there for your clients to the best of your ability. So the biggest challenge for me has been in monitoring my own mental health and looking after it whilst being in peer work. And to do this, I've had to ensure that I have healthy boundaries in place and that I practice lots of self-care.
Thanks, Kate. Incredibly insightful and thoughtful ideas and valuable for people. Heather.
Sharon.
You're looking lovely today, as always.
Oh, thanks.
What are the opportunities now in the future in the system for peer workers?
Yeah, so the concept of peer workers has been around for quite a few years, but I think the time now is really ripe for peer workers. We've got quite a lot of policies and documents that are now talking about having lived experience workforce and building that lived experience workforce. And some of those have been the 5th National Plan, our State Mental Health Services Plan. All across them, it talks about building this lived experience workforce. And I guess one of the challenges has been the how. So the National Commission's just recently been given the task of looking at a framework for the lived experience workforce. And here in South Australia, we're trying to develop that up. You're a part of that too, Sharon. So trying to get that really happening so that we have a better environment for people to work in and a much more consistent environment with some clearly defined roles. And I think Kate's alluded to some of the real difficulties with peer work in terms of, you know, having to not only do a job and have good outcomes for other people, but trying to find that, you know, that balance between your own boundaries and your own self-care. So being able to have those written down in a framework is really important. I think it's really onwards and upwards for the peer workforce. It's a matter of kind of getting these systems right. But at the moment, just about everybody that I know who's done the certificate for that I've lectured in has got a job if they are seeking a job. And I actually had news of one of this year's graduates who's just got a job as well. So incredibly exciting to think that people who may have been told that they may never work, have lost all hope around or had to change direction in terms of their own employment, can now actually find something where they feel that they fit and they can be a benefit to other people and can earn an income like everybody else. So giving people hope, to give other people hope.
Great. Thank you. Now, we had a small number of questions that came through to us from the festival that now organises during the week. And some of them we've already answered, but there's a couple there that probably we could just reiterate. So maybe, Karen, one of the questions you picked up on a little bit was around, do you actually need qualifications? So you want to give us a bit of your sense of what the value of that, do you need qualifications?
Sure. Because there's been development in trying to get this as a recognised profession, sort of like if you're a social worker, you know, that comes with a particular form of training and education. We want the same sort of thing for our peer workers. We want people out there who are accessing peer workers to have a really good quality experience with peer workers. And so the Cert 4 in mental health peer work was designed and is there to teach you about how to use your lived experience safely and purposefully, and look how to work within the legal frameworks, responsibilities to organisations that you might work for as well, and how to just work alongside somebody and make the best experience for them and for yourselves as well, and looking after your self-care and the amount of skills and development that you actually get through the Cert 4 is really amazing, and you get lots of opportunity to practice so that when you come out of the Cert 4, you're actually ready to go into the workforce and get a job like that lovely person who has graduated at this stage just recently. So yeah, it's a really important qualification that we're trying to get across the sector for all peer work to be, that will be their base qualification is in the peer work, so that they learn to use their lived experience well.
Great. Thanks, Karen. And probably our last question I'll hand to Heather, and it came during the week as well. And it probably relates to the professionalisation, the theme that we're following on around the importance of support training to do the job well. And it's what's being done to improve the peer workers' wages, Heather.
Yeah, well, there is talk of professionalising the peer workforce. That certainly was hinted at in the Productivity Commission report. It's been hinted at across a number of areas. So if we were to professionalise the peer workforce, they would be recognised in their own right as a profession. And then obviously we can set standards around wages and that type of thing, and working conditions, unions, and everything else that follows, really. Standardised. We do have the national qualification, but we could probably put in some higher ed type things and leadership that is all kind of standardised across the profession. So watch the space, because it's definitely being talked about. And Lived Experience Australia did do a big study and looked at the need and the want for the lived experience workforce professionalisation. That was a definite yes.
Great, thanks, Heather. Does anyone have any final comments before we head back to Mark? Any words of encouragement to people out there who might be wanting to become a peer worker?
Yeah, I'd just say that, if you do have your own lived experience of mental health and you are thinking of how you might be able to use that, there are different options. It's not just one-on-one work. There could be some advocacy work. There could be, you could go in and facilitate some groups. You could do all sorts of things. So, if it's definitely something you're thinking about, I encourage you to have a look, research it a little bit. Give the Mental Health Coalition a call. They have a lived experience workforce program. They might be able to give you a little bit more direction and in how to use your lived experience and different options that are out there. So, definitely give it a good thought, because we need lots of really good experienced peer workers.
Right. And that's probably a great place to finish on. Thank you very much, Karen and Kate and Heather, for your wisdom. And now I'll hand you back to Mark.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Have a good day, Mark.